Hi and welcome. I'm AnewZ and you are watching AnewZ. Here are the headlines. China retaliates against Trump's tariffs, hiking levies on American goods to 125%. 6 people die following a helicopter crash into New York's Hudson River. The 4th Antalya Diplomacy Forum, gathering world leaders, diplomats and experts, opens in Türkiye. Thank you for tuning in. China increased its tariff on U.S. goods to 125%, following U.S. President Donald Trump's levy hike on Chinese goods that now stands at 145%. Beijing said it will not respond to any possible further tariff increases by Washington, as American goods are no longer marketable at the current tariff rates. Mahnur Magdum reports from Beijing.
China has strongly responded to the United States amid their rapidly escalating trade war by increasing tariffs on U.S. imports to 125% from the previous 84%. This move comes as a direct response to President Donald Trump's recent decision to increase tariffs on Chinese imports to 145%. The new tariffs are expected to take effect on Saturday and would render a wide range of American products uncompetitive in the Chinese market. The economic fallout has already begun. Tesla has suspended its orders for China for certain U.S. made models, and China is enacting an export control measure of rare earth minerals. The escalating trade war between the world's 2 largest economies has caused concerns internationally, with fears of recession growing amid analysts and investors. The coming weeks will be critical in determining whether either side will seek a diplomatic solution. Mahnur Magdum, AnewZ, Beijing, China.
Just hours before Beijing's latest response to Washington's tariffs, Chinese President Xi Jinping hosted Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez. He invited the European Union to join China in opposing bullying from the United States. Sánchez urged dialogue between China and the U.S. and called for a more balanced China-EU trade relationship at a moment when the world is facing extraordinary challenges. Sánchez's Beijing trip provoked a reaction from Washington, where U.S. Treasury Secretary compared Madrid's attempts to forge closer trade relations with China with, quote, cutting their own throat.
Not long ago, I co-authored an article with Brazilian President Lula and South African President Ramaphosa calling for support for multilateralism, the safeguarding of the common good of all humanity, in opposition to isolationism, unilateralism and decoupling.
The U.S.-China trade tensions could cut the trade of goods between the 2 economies by as much as 80%, warned the Director General of the World Trade Organization. She said that dividing the global economy into 2 blocks could result in a long-term drop of around 7% in global real GDP. China's WTO delegation said today it had filed an additional complaint over the new U.S. tariffs.
The escalating trade tensions between the United States and China pose a significant risk of a sharp contraction in their bilateral trade. Our preliminary projections suggest that merchandise trade between these 2 economies could decrease by as much as 80%. Further escalation becomes tantamount to a shutting off of bilateral trade between the 2 countries, a decoupling. The negative macroeconomic effects will not be confined to U.S. and China alone, but will extend to other countries, especially the least developed nations. Of particular concern is the potential fragmentation of global trade along geopolitical lines. A division of the global economy into 2 blocks could lead to long-term reduction in global real GDP by nearly 7%.
Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, met with Russia's top economic negotiator, Kirill Dmitriev, in St. Petersburg, state media reported. This is the U.S. official's 3rd visit to the country as Washington pushes for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The Kremlin said that Vladimir Putin would also be in town today without saying whether the 2 would meet. Witkoff has met Putin twice, and after their last meeting, the longtime Trump ally who worked with the U.S. president in real estate said Putin was a great leader. The talks on a minerals agreement between Ukraine and the US are set to begin today in Washington. Ahead of the meetings, the Ukrainian side said any agreement must align with Kyiv's current commitments.
Technical consultations between the United States and Ukraine on a prospective minerals agreement will begin in Washington on Friday. Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Ola Stefanishina confirmed. The discussions come as US President Donald Trump seeks a bilateral deal granting the US access to Ukraine's mineral resources, positioning it as part of a broader strategy to help end Russia's war on Ukraine. Trump has also framed the deal as a potential way to recoup military aid provided to Kyiv, despite that support not being issued as a loan. Speaking in Brussels on Thursday, Stefanishina underscored that any agreement must align with Ukraine's current commitments.
One thing I can confirm for sure that nothing in the agreement can be negotiated with Ukraine in a way that will undermine the existing commitments and obligations Ukraine has, including the financial ones within Ukraine facility, macro-financial assistance, IMF cooperation. This is something that is not subjected to any negotiating format, and having said that, it means that the appropriate adjustments has to be done into the format of the agreement later on.
According to a Ukrainian government document dated April 8th, Kyiv has set aside $2.7 million for consulting services to safeguard national interests and develop a formal negotiating position. The Trump administration has reportedly expanded the scope of its original proposal, seeking preferential access to Ukraine's mineral reserves.
NATO allies have pledged an additional 21 billion euros in military aid to Kyiv, following a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in the NATO headquarters in Brussels. British Defense Secretary John Healey said that 2025 is the critical year for the war in Ukraine, and that right now is the critical moment. Today's meeting was the 27th gathering of the UDCG and the second to be chaired by Britain, who took over since Donald Trump returned to the White House.
And the new pledges of military aid announced today through the UDCG total over 21 billion euros. A record boost in military funding for Ukraine, and we're also surging that support to the frontline fight.
6 people have died when a helicopter crashed into the Hudson River in New York. Officials say the victims included a Spanish family who booked a sightseeing flight and the pilot.
God. Oh my gosh.
A deadly helicopter crash in the Hudson River in New York on Thursday killed all 6 people on board, including 3 children. The aircraft, carrying a Spanish family of 5 and their pilot, went down shortly after takeoff, according to officials. The aircraft was a Bell 206 operated by New York helicopters, took off from the downtown Manhattan heliport at 1 minute to 3 in the afternoon. Moments later, it lost control near the George Washington Bridge and crashed upside down into the river near Hoboken, New Jersey at around 3:15. Emergency services said they responded within minutes.
According to the manifest, aboard the helicopter were 6 people, 1 pilot, 2 adults, and 3 children. NYPD divers pulled 4 people from the crash site, and FDNY divers recovered an additional 2. Immediate life-saving measures were undertaken on the vessels at the scene, as well as the adjoining pier. 4 victims were pronounced dead on scene, and 2 more were removed to local area hospitals, where sadly both succumbed to their injuries. Names are being withheld at this time, pending family notification.
The Federal Aviation Administration confirms the model of the aircraft and says the National Transportation Safety Board will lead the investigation into the cause of the crash. So far, no official cause has been identified.
Paris is planning to recognize the Palestinian state and could do so as early as June, French President Emmanuel Macron said in an interview with a French broadcaster. Macron said he hoped that by recognizing Palestinian statehood at a conference in June, that France is co-hosting with Saudi Arabia, pushing for a two-state solution. Attendees who do not formally recognize Israel would in turn do so. Joining us to talk on the French plan to recognize Palestine is Abdenour Toumi, a French politics specialist coming to us from Paris. Hi and welcome. What do you make of Macron's plans, especially following recent similar decisions by Spain, Ireland, Slovenia?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Actually, this comes President Emmanuel Macron in the two-state solution imperative. And this goes to decades ago, since 1967, and it was actually policy then by the government followed later. It is the socialist president from Iran, actually, who did speak before the Knesset in 1982 to Jacques Chirac later. But what happened, it was this kind of balanced policy between what in France or the France's Arab policy, and on the other hand, as a special policy with Israel. But what is happening now, actually, in the light of the October 7th and then the operation from Israelis, the 1 year cut is taking place in Gaza. So this is a new reset that President Macron is trying to find, again, I would say, a symbolic solution to what is going on. But the question here is, as far as the what he stated, to bring the Arabs to recognize, on the other hand, Israel. Actually, this is not true. I mean, there is the Arab Peace Initiative on the table that was proposed in 2002 in Beirut summit, and asking all Arab countries, the 22 Arab countries, asking for Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories and from Golan Heights and Lebanon, and as a result, the Arabs will recognize Israel. So,
well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on such a brief notice. Elsewhere, the 4th Antalya Diplomacy Forum gathering world leaders, diplomats and experts opened today in Turkey. This time, the central theme is diplomacy in a fragmented world. Our Katie Wilson, who is at the forum, brings us the latest updates.
Well, I'm joining you now from Antalya, and this room behind me is still really busy, and that's because the opening ceremony of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum has just concluded. It was standing room only in here, as you can probably tell, and we heard from both the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan as well as the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Now, they say this forum this year is a call to action to reclaim diplomacy amid rising global divisions. The forum, they pointed out that global conflicts have doubled in the past 5 years. Therefore, diplomacy is an important tool in navigating this changing global landscape. Now, Hakan Fidan highlighted the panels and the roundtables that will be taking place discussing the Gaza conflict, and this was also something that Recep Tayyip Erdogan discussed. He discussed many global conflicts and highlighted Israel's role within the Gaza conflict. Now, he also discussed the future of Syria and also said that Turkey is ready to take the responsibility for European security. So he was touching upon many global issues here, and that's exactly what's going to happen over the next 3 days at this forum, and AnewZ will be bringing you the latest. I'll be here in Antalya and I will keep you updated.
Well, that was our Katie Wilson reporting from the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Also on day one, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev met with the interim president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, at the sidelines of the forum. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev also met with his Turkish counterpart, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in Antalya. Aliyev praised the Antalya Diplomacy Forum as a major platform for international dialogue. The leaders talked on the strengthening alliance between their countries and discussed regional developments. Both sides reaffirmed their commitment to regional cooperation and stability. The United States has reaffirmed its support for Azerbaijan's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. The message of support came in a letter from U.S. President Donald Trump to Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev on the occasion of Nowruz. In the letter sent on April 10th, Trump congratulated the Azerbaijani people, describing Nowruz as a symbol of peace, prosperity, and renewal. He praised the strong partnership between the two countries and expressed optimism about future cooperation. Trump also acknowledged Azerbaijan's support for Israel and its role in promoting regional peace, underscoring the strategic importance of U.S.-Azerbaijan relations. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe adopted a resolution condemning Georgia's democratic backsliding. The Georgian government rejected the resolution, calling it politically biased. Our Nini Nikolaishvili brings more on that from Tbilisi.
The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has adopted a sharply worded resolution condemning what is described as Georgia's democratic backsliding with an overwhelming majority of 89 votes to 3. The resolution paints a grim picture. It accuses the ruling Georgian Dream Party of dismantling the democratic institutions, restricting media and civil society, and suppressing the opposition voices. The Assembly voiced a deep concern over what is referred as foreign agent law, likely to Russian-style legislation aimed at silencing critical NGOs and independent media. The resolution also condemned the recent legislative amendments to Georgia's electoral code and the media laws. The PACE criticized the Georgian delegation's complete absence in Strasbourg, which withdrew after their credentials were ratified subject to conditions in January, calling it the rejection of democratic dialogue. In response, Georgian Dream representatives rejected the resolution's findings, calling it political biased and based on misinformation promoted by the opposition and certain NGOs. The government stated that Georgia remains committed to democratic principles and argued that recent reforms were necessary for the regional security and transparency. The representatives of Georgian government also rejected accusations and criticism about the foreign agent law, insisting that this is modeled after the Western practices. Despite the strong language of resolution, it is non-binding and based on the previous statements from Georgia's delegation to PACE and the Georgian government. It came now with surprise or did not cause any concern for the Georgian government, which remains very resolute in the face of PACE criticism. This is Nina Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, AnewZ.
The second Sustainable Construction Summit was held at the Sea Breeze Resort in Baku. The summit was co-organized by the Azerbaijan Industrial Safety Association and PMD projects under the theme People, Planet, Prosperity.
When we think about sustainable construction, what comes to mind? Concrete, steel, and lots of green. But no one truly thinks that these projects are actually building the future of the planet. In this summit, we're discussing how to serve both the environment and the economy of the future.
Can a balance between environmental responsibility and economic development truly be achieved? The answer is yes. We learned that at the Sustainable Construction Summit that brought together 7 keynote speakers and 250 executives, managers and decision makers. Co-organised by Azerbaijan Industrial Safety Association and PMD projects, Key discussions focused on environmental protection and efficient resource use, urban planning trends and innovation in green construction. Experts agreed that apply sustainability principles in project management is the key matter at stake.
If we wouldn't set this balance between the construction and the sustainability, between the green sensitivity to the other segmentations of the real estate, we would have a nice, we wouldn't have a nice future for all of us. So that's a mandatory, and that's one aspect of that question. Another aspect is when you make an investment to the real estate industry, it should be sustainable as well. Otherwise, you will lose money.
Sometimes green solutions in construction are so innovative that it feels like we're not building but creating a futuristic city. But the question is, can green construction be as strong as concrete?
Capitalization of real estate market in the world is around $380 trillion, where sustainable construction just takes only 0.1% of this value, which shows how much perspective is still there. So it shouldn't be only as a trend and as a kind of extra value or added value. The sustainable construction is the mainstream of future. So we have to invest. This is now the position where we have no other choice other than investing into the sustainable construction.
A Davos-style follow-up panel discussed the Sustainable Green Construction Declaration, where experts were keen to raise concerns and express their opinions. The companies that contributed to the development of the construction sector honoured with the Builders' Awards ceremony. The summit reaffirmed that sustainable construction is a shared responsibility shaping the future of urban development.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you for watching, and do stay tuned to AnewZ.